Hello, and welcome to another episode of Light Up the Darkness. I'm your host, Erin. On today's episode, I'm joined by my guest, Anise Barnett, who is a maternal mental health and child therapist. She's also known as the Breakthrough Mama. Today, we'll discuss children's mental health. I was lucky enough to attend one of Anise's amazing parenting workshops called Parenting Through a Pandemic and Beyond, and it's been extremely helpful to me, and I can't wait for you all to hear her insight. So today, grab a pencil or a notebook, notepad, the notes app in your phone, whatever. She'll be dropping some gems that I think will be useful to parents and caregivers during these challenging times. And don't forget to stay tuned to the end of the episode for our mindful moment. Anise will lead us with a very special grounding technique that parents can use with their children, parents and caregivers alike. And there will be a special appearance by my favorite little person. So check that out. Hi, Anise. Welcome to Light Up the Darkness podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So for the people listening today, do you want to give a little bit of a background on who you are quickly?
Yes, sure. I am a child and maternal mental health therapist. So I've worked with children and particularly their mothers for over 6 years, really supporting the relationship between parent and child. But I've also supported children in working through a variety of mental health concerns, such as anxiety, depression, trauma, just to name a few. And so I've really helped families get hands-on strategies to help get their kids through those difficult times, to work through those strategies, and really always making sure that the bond between parent and child is restored as we also do our work together.
So a big part of this podcast is kind of helping to normalize conversations about mental health in the Black community. And an issue that I think often exists in our community is that we tend to not address mental health concerns until it's sometimes kind of an emergency, or it's like like kind of almost too late. So how do you think we can work to kind of break those cycles in our families, beginning with our children?
Yes. Okay. I think that's a great question. And that's a lot of the reason why I do the work I do as well is sometimes when we talk a lot about generational wealth, and I've been thinking lately a lot about generational health. How do we pass down generational good mental health to our children? And I really think that everything starts with the parent first, and really just acknowledging. First, you have to have that awareness, acknowledge what you've seen, and that what you've seen, what you've been exposed to, doesn't work well. If we skip that step, it's not going to work, because when we are frustrated, when we're tired, we're always going to go back to what we know. It's automatic. So I definitely think it starts with just that first step of acknowledging that not only did that not work, but really hone into your experience. When you were a child, how did that make you feel when your own mental health was not acknowledged, when it was not validated? And really apply that to your child. Is that the experience that you want for your child to have? Of course, I have some strategies that you could be using as a parent to really demonstrate the importance of mental health, but also we can be proactive, right? We can be preventative as parents by doing simple things to ensure that our children feel that they can talk to us. Because one of the byproducts of believing that mental health is not important or shouldn't be addressed is that the people who are experiencing mental health concerns think that they can't speak up. And,
Yeah.
And so I often hear a lot of parents asking, how do I get my child to talk to me? Or, they hear from the school that the child is going through depression, or that there's something really serious happening as a result of mental health. And now they're wondering, well, why didn't they tell me? Why aren't they opening up about these things? And that's really where mental health starts, is creating an environment between you and your child in your home where they can really talk about things. They really feel comfortable opening up.
Mm-hmm.
I think if a lot of us take that time and we think back to what did our parents say or our grandparents say about us as children having our own thoughts, experiences,
Mm-hmm.
or feelings, we can remember them saying, things like children are meant to be seen and not heard.
Right.
Maybe even if our parents attempted to have that relationship with us, we might remember hearing a great aunt or a grandma saying, "You're doing too much talking with that child. You just need to tell
Mm-hmm.
them what to do." And the challenge with that is we're sending a message to children very early on that what they think and what they have to say isn't important. And we want them to know that they can come to us. It's safe. We've always set up this environment where they can talk about their mental health to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important. That was actually a question that came in through social media where a commenter named Alexis wanted to know, like, how do we kind of change that narrative of children should be seen and not heard, which I know many of us grew up hearing often. I know I did. And yeah, so what are some, like, do you have any like tangible maybe examples of ways to kind of directly work with your child in that way to develop that open environment where they
Yes.
feel free to express themselves?
Yes. So I'm going to give you two tangible ways. First, I always believe that you kind of have to set the foundation with your children. Um, and I talk often about these three pitfalls that parents tend to fall into that does not create that open environment. So I'm going to use that to kind of share how you can actually create that environment that is open to talk about feeling, to talk about mental health. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so number one, parents are often problem solving for their kids. When they know that an issue arises or their kid expresses an issue, a lot of times because we care about them, we love them, we want things to go well for them, we jump in and we try to save the day. We tell them how to solve the problem. But really, that's not always our job as a parent. Our job is to connect with our kids and to partner with their kids as they navigate life so they have those skills as they grow up as well. And so I think that when it comes to problem solving, it's really important for us to take the back seat and allow our kids
Mm-hmm.
to just talk, right? When they just talk and we listen, it sends the clear message, I'm here to hear you out. And
Yeah.
and that's simple, right? I can be here and just hear you out. And as a byproduct of that, you get children who learn how to solve problems on their own, but also children who learn to trust the solutions they come up with. And that's really,
Mm-hmm.
really important as they grow up. Um, the second thing is sometimes we do too much talking. We've all been children and teenagers before. And when we know that something's going on in their lives, we go back to those moments and we say, we feel like an expert almost, right? Because we've been there before. We have some
Mm-hmm.
tools. We can maybe use our story to help our kids get through it. And that's true. There's definitely a time and place for that. But it's always important to kind of check yourself as a parent. Am I talking too much? Am I leaving enough space for my kids to talk? Because if we do too much talking, we're not leaving the floor open for them, right?
Right.
So when we talk about space, there's not only physical space, but there's emotional space. So when we use it up talking only about our experiences on, we don't create open space and environment for our kids. And as a result, they'll shut down. And so
Yeah.
again, we just, it's that mindfulness as a parent, stopping ourselves and just being able to say, you know what? I think mom's doing too much talking right now. And I really, really want to hear what you have to say. And that's important to know because we're not perfect. We're imperfect
Yeah.
people as we mother, and we're not going to always get it right. And so it's important to know that we can actually say that out loud. We can say,
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking too much. And I get the sense that you just really wanted to share something to me with me and you wanted me to hear you. So I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to be quiet and I'm just going to let you talk and I'm going to listen. It is
Mm-hmm.
it is definitely a fine line, but I encourage parents to always, at the bottom line, to remember that your child is a person who has the right to their own experiences, thoughts, and feelings. And
Mm-hmm.
when you internalize that, it makes the other things easier to do. It makes it a lot
Yeah.
easier to let your child talk first
Mm-hmm.
and to not feel like you have to correct the feelings, that you have to correct the behavior all the time. Um,
Right.
there's a time and place to do those things, but we want to always let our kids know that you can at least start the conversation and I'm not going to jump down your throat.
Well, that is a really good transition into the next part of our conversation. Um, so all of that foundation building of and creating an open space, an open environment to express our emotions will need to be in place before we deal with some of the effects of the pandemic on our children. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You agree?
Totally agree.
So yeah, I'm not the expert here, but so we're talking about the pandemic, and like I said, I know a lot of parents have been concerned about this for the duration of this pandemic, which is the effect on our children and their mental health and their overall well being. Um, I mean, we're trying to keep our families safe and keeping them away from others. We're following the rules, but as a result, our children are taken out of their usual routines and not able to socialize in the way that they once did. Um, and I think particularly for younger children, I have a 6-year-old who's kind of just ramping up on her friendships. Like they were just beginning to get stronger, you know. Um, and I worry about the long-term effects of that, like being away from people. What do you think the long-term impacts of this will have on our children?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, just even speaking as a parent, I also have a lot of those same concerns. And my son is a toddler right now, and he certainly wasn't in school developing those meaningful relationships, but he did have friends too. He had children that he was used to having play dates with and being in our community with. And he's so social. He was used to music class. And I can see even in our home the impact that the lack of socializing has had on him and how he's much more irritable. He's easily frustrated because we're
Mm-hmm.
always kind of, um, we're doing the same things. We're always in the same environment. We're always playing in the same spaces with the same things. And I try to keep that in the forefront of my mind when I recognize that he's being irritable. And I think, okay, let's just step outside for a little bit. Let's take a walk because you're right. These do
Mm-hmm.
have, such a impact on our kids when it comes to socializing. Um, in terms of long term, with socializing for our kids, um, I think that we won't know exactly what that's going to look like until our kids are older and we start to see whether or not that had an impact on their ability to socialize well with others. But what I would say is the same thing I would say to anything is your child's experience during this time is going to have a lot to do with their experience at home. How they're going to get through this is you. What they're going to remember about this is you. And so they're going to, remember and think back to, were my parents there for me during this time? Maybe I felt worried. Maybe I was frustrated that I was missing out on my friendships. And how did my parents really support me through that? Did they
Mm-hmm.
guide me? Did they listen to me? Did they acknowledge and validate how I felt? Because we can't control what's happening on the inside, but we can control how we're responding in our home. And so children who grow up feeling validated by their trusted people, by their loved ones, we know that then when they go out in the world, that as they feel secure emotionally on the inside, that's something that they can give out to other people, right? So they may not
Mm-hmm.
they may not be in school every day socializing, but when they come back to that time, they sort of have that internal part built up. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
my parents showed me what it looked like to validate. They showed me how to manage really tough times like a pandemic, like a crisis. And so when I'm at school and I see things happen, maybe that are unfair, that are difficult, I know from what my parents showed me and what they did for me, I know how to be there for my friends. So that's one way
Mm-hmm.
that we can reframe it, one way that we can think about it. Um, Hands on, I mean, just like all the other moms out there, I'm feeling the same way. Like I'm sad that my son is
Mm-hmm.
missing out on these experiences to socialize and, having such a small one. Of course, I was so excited for all the things that we would do this summer. And so I've just been
Yeah.
getting creative, and it's really important to me to also socially distance. And so I've done things like, plan with community members and say, hey, we're close. Our kids are close. We're going to still socially distance, but maybe in the backyard, um, your kids are going to stay far away and my child is going to stay far away, but we'll have separate pools, so
Mm-hmm.
it's strange to think about, but we've been able to say, okay, we can do things that are normal in the summer, but they're fun to our kids and we can socially distance so that our kids, they
Mm-hmm.
can talk from far away to each other.
Mm-hmm.
They can still make memories and we can take pictures and it's all at a distance, but there's still something that we're still trying to incorporate some level of socialization and some memories that include other people in a safe way. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, does that, do you feel like that answers the question?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's very important, like you said, to acknowledge and recognize that this is hard and it is sad. Like, and it's okay to feel that. Um, but just being creative is, I feel like that's the number one mission of moms or parents, like even before this. So,
Absolutely.
it's good to get advice from people like you, though. So,
You know,
thank you.
you're welcome. And I will also say that sometimes I try to tell parents that, sometimes we can think that hiding our own experiences during tough times is the right way to go. And that's not
Mm-hmm.
always true. Certainly if we are having really intense anger or grief or sadness, we should go to a
Mm-hmm.
trusted adult. But there's nothing
Mm-hmm.
wrong with also saying to your child or in front of your child that this sucks. Like a
Yeah.
mommy is also really sad because I'm also missing out on spending time with my friends too. And spending time with my friends make me feel good. They make me, relax. They make me laugh. And I miss that a lot too. And
Mm-hmm.
that again, goes back to that relatable part. It goes back to that connection part. It makes your children feel like, what they're going through isn't crazy. It makes them feel like they can talk to you about what they're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing. And as they see you manage those things well, it may not be perfect, but they see that you're still functioning, you're still being able to do um, the things you have to do for yourself and for them. It shows them, like, oh, well, I can be sad and I can miss things. I can even maybe feel angry about this, just like mommy and daddy, but I can still do what I have to do. I can still do my homework. I can still engage with online school. I can still do what I have to do. So I think that, like, just that level of relating and modeling for your kids is also something that you can do during this time.
Yeah. I I've actually been working on that a lot personally, with my daughter, and when she has like an emotional moment or is feeling down, I'm just like, it's okay that you feel that way. I understand, like I know that it's hard. And then I've noticed that she just feels more, it seems like a relief almost for
Mm-hmm.
her, and she gets she just like lets it out and then we cuddle or hug or whatever, and it's over, and it's not like a challenging moment. It's just like a nice comforting moment for us. So
I love
um
that. I love that
yeah.
so much. And I feel like it's simple, but it's powerful. How
Mhm.
you use connection and you use physical touch
Mm-hmm.
to really be there for your child. And you're right. If we don't validate, if we don't validate for them, then it does stay inside. And I always encourage parents to think about yourself. Like they're little people too, and they feel like we feel most of the times. And
Mm-hmm.
when somebody comes, when we're dealing with something emotional and they don't validate us and they come right in with the solution, how do we feel? We feel invalidated. We feel like we can't release what we're thinking and feeling, and we have to keep it inside. And so it's just powerful to be able to
Mm-hmm.
help your kids name and label what they're thinking and feeling, and to validate it so that they can express that, navigate it, and move forward. So that's powerful. Good job.
Thanks. Patting myself on the back right now. It's a work in progress, though. So yeah, in terms of, I feel like you answered this already, but and some of the tips you gave might apply. But in terms of some of the more difficult reactions or behaviors, like anger and anxiety, um, tantrums, breakdowns that children might be experiencing, what advice would you give parents who this is their first time dealing with it and they have just no idea what to do
Yeah,
to help their child?
that's a good question, because we can set the foundation, but it doesn't mean that our kids are not going to become angry or anxious. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they're already there, and we just didn't have the tools. We didn't know how to set the foundation in advance, and that's okay. I want parents to know that just because you haven't been setting that foundation, just because you haven't been doing something, it's not too late to do it now.
Right.
You can always make a turnaround. And if you have older kids, like middle school age kids, or even like a fifth grader and a high schooler, you can even just verbally express to them that you want things to change. You can say, I noticed that you've been feeling angry lately, and maybe I haven't done the best job of making you feel like you can talk to me about these things or showing you how to deal with that. But I take responsibility for, moving forward. I want us to be closer. I want you to feel like you can talk to me. And so you might notice that I'm going to do things differently. I might say things differently, and it might
Mm-hmm.
surprise you. And I hope that at some point you'll see those things and you'll feel comfortable talking to me about what's making you feel angry. Um,
Right.
because if we just go in, especially with older kids, right? Because they are thinking as quickly as we are. They're connecting the dots and they're trying to understand what's happening. So as we make those changes, they're going to be noticing and they're going to wonder, like, why is mommy and daddy doing that? And so it's great to let them know. Just let them in on it. Hey, I actually want us to be able to talk about these things. So you're going to see me doing that. And I hope that you
Mm-hmm.
feel this way. Don't put the pressure on them. Just let them know, I hope what I do will make you feel comfortable. Um, Additionally, I would say the first thing, parents first have to kind of recognize and understand that anger isn't bad at all,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just a feeling. It's the
Yeah.
behavior that is the concern for us, and that's really what we want to teach our child is the anger is separate from the behavior. They don't have to go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to give them different tools, different ways that they can manage their anger. And so I just first want parents to kind of understand that your kid, your child, they want to do better, right? First and
Yeah.
foremost, your kid does not feel good when they get really angry and they throw something or they hit somebody or they say mean things. It makes them feel really bad on the inside. It really does. I can promise you that from the many, 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 many children that I've talked to. But in the moment, they just don't know how to respond. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm gonna give some hands-on tools, but I just want parents to know that first. And I want you to also know that the best time to support your children in managing anger or worry is when they're not angry and when they're not worried.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they're angry and they're worried, just like you and I, they're not functioning at their best. Their brain is trying to manage and navigate their physiological responses to the feelings, the mental and psychological aspects to their feelings. And so we really want to catch them at baseline when they're doing well. I always encourage that parents kind of create this space in their house that their kids can be directed to when they're having really big feelings like anger, frustration, and worry. And that'll be a space where you're going to have some sensory based play items. Like you can have kinetic sand. Children love kinetic sand so much, and let them choose the color so that they have some choice in things. Choice always makes kids feel great. But you can also put things like Play-Doh in there as well. You want to put expressive things in there. So you want to make sure you have coloring pencils and crayons. You want blank paper, but you also want to have coloring books in there as well. If your child has a specific knack for art, then you'll include different things, different mediums that they use when they're doing art. Um, you might even want to have, wherever this space is, you might want to have on the wall or even in just a laminated piece of paper that kind of reminds them the things that they can be doing. So you might even have on there, this is your time to take 5, to cool down when you're having big feelings. You can use something expressive to release what you're feeling, or you can use your kinetic sand or your Play-Doh. You can even remind them on there to take some deep breaths, and um, you can direct them to do these things on their own eventually. But when children are first learning these tools, I really encourage parents to co-regulate. And what that means is you're using your nervous system, your calm and your cool, and passing that on to them. And that means that you're going to partner with your kids. You're going to connect with them in this moment. Just like you were saying, like that you validated your daughter and you saw that release in her. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
start there. You're going to say, I noticed that you're angry in this moment. I noticed that you're feeling a lot of worry. And if this happened to me, I'd feel angry and worried too.
Mm-hmm.
Yelling and kicking are not appropriate ways of expressing that, but there are other ways that we can manage that we can deal with that. When I feel anger, when I feel worry, coloring helps me cool down. So let's go to your Tick 5 station together. And you can choose. You get to choose what we're going to do. And mommy will do exactly what you choose to do. So if your kid chooses to color, you're going to get a piece of paper and you're going to do that too. If they want to take a deep breath to cool down, you're going to guide them. You're going to do a little guided breathing with them. And so that really models for them. Co-regulation is so important because our kids just don't necessarily have the mature nervous system, the mature regulation skills yet to do it on their own. And so the more that you engage with them, the better their
Mm-hmm.
ability is to do it on their own. And so as you do it on your own, you can then start practicing and saying, it seems like you're angry right now. I think it would be a good idea for you to go to your Take 5 station and see how they do on their own, as time goes by. So I think that that's great for anger, but also worry. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and additionally with worry, I know that we went over what's called the worry jar. And this is a
Yeah.
simple activity that I've done it in therapy. I've taught lots of parents how to do it, and anybody can do it because you don't really have to go out and buy anything. You can get an old pasta jar or old shoe box, and I know we all have some of those in our house. Um, and what I tend to do is say that there is a specific time, and we call it worry time, and that may be like about 15 minutes that your child gets to really go there. They get to push their worries to the extreme because specifically for children who have a lot of anxiety and worry, like their mind is really going to go there. But it's not your job to stop the worry. It's just your job to give them that space and that time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in that time, you can allow them to write it down on strips of paper, or you can write it down for them. You can just say, hey, you go for it. Let the worries flow out, and you'll write down as many as you can catch on strips of paper. And then you have your child read them back out and put them in the jar. and then they're going to put the lid back on the box or the jar. And you can actually talk about what that process is like for them. What did it feel like to just be able to express all your worries and concerns and get it out? How did it feel to have mommy write it down? And what was it like to
Mm-hmm.
actually put it in that box, in that jar, and lock it away until our next worry time? And they'll let you know, like, maybe it felt good to lock it away. Maybe it
Mm-hmm.
feels great to have a specific time that they know that they don't have to be controlled by worries all day. They can let it go at a certain time. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why generally people do put the time on it, is because we want to support them and not letting their lives be overrun by anxiety. Because one thing that's important to understand about children and worries or anxiety is that it's not our job to take away worry, to make anxiety disappear. Because
Mm-hmm.
even the things that give them, that trigger anxiety at home, we might take that away. We might control it at home. But when they step foot outside, we don't have the ability to control all of that for them. And so we
Right.
gotta, give them some tools, some ways that they can navigate that in a world that isn't controlled. Um,
Yeah.
so I would recommend that. And I also wanted to recommend two books that I think would be really good, because reading is fantastic for our kids. I think we all know that it has
Mm-hmm.
so many great benefits. But when it comes to mental health, when I work with children, I use what's called bibliotherapy, and most people that work with children do that same thing as well. And bibliotherapy is just means that you take a book that is on a specific topic, you read it with the child, but after, you're processing with them what they received from that book. You're really processing through with them. What was that person experiencing? What was their thoughts? What do you think they were thinking when they felt worried? Um, and so just doing that will help your kid to connect their thoughts with their worries and their behaviors. And it can also, reading those books, give them tools on how to manage it. And it's relatable because often the books are about other kids. So it feels really relatable
Yeah.
to them. So there's one called Ruby's Worry, and that's actually about a Black girl. So it's really
Mm-hmm.
relatable. And then there's one called Don't Think About Purple Elephants. So yeah, those would be my recommendations.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll include those in the episode notes.
But I will
Okay.
also encourage parents. So no matter what it is that your kid is going through, somebody probably has wrote a book about it. So, there's nothing wrong with checking out Google and, looking for books that are on specific behaviors, experiences, and feelings that your kids are
Mm-hmm.
going through. And just go through the list. And sometimes, a lot of those children's books are on YouTube. So you can actually just go on YouTube and see if it's a book
Nice.
that you think is relatable for your child, that you feel comfortable sharing with your child first. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Um, so I have one last question for you. Um, in terms of, this is a big question, so if you don't have an answer, it's okay. But in terms of again, getting back to like the long-term effects of the pandemic on our children, it's traumatic, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think that's like a consensus that this experience is like a trauma that we are all experiencing. Um, how, like, going eventually, once we get to the other side of things, hopefully, we will start to go back to like our normal ish routines and stuff. For example, like going back to school or daycare or whatever it is. What are some things we should do to address the trauma? Like, is it just the same advice that you have for just getting through, like to work through things, or is there like something more that we should do? I mean, I think we're all aware that it's trauma, and I know like in the schools, particularly here in New York City, they are talking about being mindful of the fact that this, like, addressing our children's mental health is a thing. I don't know what they're going to do about it, but like what can we do as parents to to take care of our children in
Yeah,
that way?
I think that's a great question. Just even specifically because this question just acknowledges that our kids are having their own experience outside of us. And that's super, super important. Um, just in helping them process and navigate this experience, it's important for them to feel like, oh, grown-ups really acknowledge that I'm having my own experience. As it pertains to trauma, of course, I agree that this has the potential to have the impact of trauma to produce trauma symptoms in our children because there's a lot of fear of loss, and then there are lots of actual things that our children are losing. Um,
Hmm.
there's that constant and real fear that children will lose people that they
Yeah, and
love.
some children probably have already.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. I was just gonna say that is right. Some children have actually lost people they really love because of this, and just a right, loss can be a trauma, right? Um, and I say can be, and it's not because one thing that we talk about in mental health is that at the end of the day, two people can go through the same experience, and one person will process it as trauma, and the other person will not. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's important that we're definitely recognizing the potential for this to have traumatic effects on our kids, but it doesn't mean
Right.
that we have to sit around and wait for this. If your kids feel supported, if your child is managing and navigating well, um
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to feel like you constantly are waiting around the corner for
Right.
trauma, right? Like maybe your child is demonstrating some level of resilience in this. And even for children who are not yet demonstrating resilience, they have the potential to demonstrate, but also develop resilience as they also navigate this. So I just want to
Mm-hmm.
say that as an encouraging piece for parents. But I hear one thing that I think is that you can do is mindfulness with your children. Um, and so, of course, we've all kind of heard those same things about mindfulness about deep breathing, about guided meditations,
Mm-hmm.
and all of those things. But there's one thing that I think that can be particularly simple and powerful with your children, especially in this time. And that's really focusing on mindfulness as the present, right? Bringing your kids back into the present in this moment and saying, those fears are real, the loss is real, right? Maybe it's the loss of your day-to-day friendships.
Right.
Maybe it's the loss of your routine, the loss of your teachers that you had strong bonds with. It's just the loss of life as you knew it. Um, and I acknowledge that. Um, but bringing them back to this present moment that you can't predict what's going to happen next, but right now you're safe. In
Mm-hmm.
this moment, we are home. We are in our home. You can list the people that are in your house. You are with mom, you're with dad, you're with your sister or your grandma, and we're safe right now. We are
Mm-hmm.
washing our hands, we are taking precautions. We're doing these things in this moment. And I know that that sounds kind of like a small thing to do, but it's really a big thing because one of the things that might be associated with trauma or associated with what your child has experienced is the anxiety that we just talked about. Um, and with that anxiety, our kids' minds might be running a mile a minute. What's going to happen? What can potentially happen? What does this mean for next school year? Um, and so just helping our kids practice how to get back into this moment is safety. That's one thing that we
Right.
can give them. Because that's sort of what happens with trauma, right? Like when the trauma is over, we whenever we're triggered and we think back to that particular trauma, it brings back a feeling of uncertainty and of unsafety. And so the best that we can do to provide some feeling of safety, some thoughts about safety for our children, can be really helpful and powerful in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
I would also encourage parents to think about how trauma might present itself. And so sometimes I think that we think about trauma kind of maybe looking like maybe fear, or we think about it as looking really sad, but also
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that trauma can look like anger, it can look like rage, but it can also look like forgetfulness. It can look like your child being irresponsible. It can look like your child zoning out. And so as you're
Mm-hmm.
home with your kids and you're asking them to follow through on certain tasks, to be mindful yourself as a parent and be recognizing that perhaps this lack of responsibility that they usually show but they're not able to do right now, what should my response as a parent be? Is it
Mm-hmm.
to get upset, to get frustrated, or to remember that, my child might be navigating something really intense right now, what they're going through. And so tapping into that compassion, but tapping into a lot of those different skills that we talked about that will really help your kids kind of address and talk about the trauma that they're
Mm-hmm.
feeling, or just the emotions that they're feeling, because maybe it's not trauma, right? But it's stress. I think we can all agree that
Yeah.
our kids are going through a stressful time. And so, um, I think, the simple things that we all talk about when we're dealing with stress is we can't control everything that's happening on the outside world, but the things that we can control at home. And so two of those things are going to be, of course, a routine, but also choices.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so with routine, I tell parents, do the routine to the best of your ability. It's hard to always, keep to a specific routine and schedule. And so I like the word routine more than I like schedule, because schedule implies a time. Routine implies that there's like a system of things that we do. And so just kind of keeping your kids in a routine, a system, an order of operations of how things go, that helps give your kids safety, um, just simply knowing what to expect next really says, okay, that gives their mind something less to think about, to process what's happening next, what's going to happen. They can predict that. Um,
Yeah.
the second thing is choices, and I think choices are really powerful in this particular time we're in, because your child has lost a lot of the spaces where they exercise choice and where they have choice. When they're
Mm-hmm.
in school, they might have to sit there and do their work, but they do get a lot of choices in school. They get to choose their friends, they get to choose who they hang out with, they get to choose the pencil they're using, in that class. They get to choose, what they're gonna do during recess with their friends. There's just so many minor choices that they get in school that they don't get at home, because we think back to pre-pandemic times. Our children would come home from school and there would be that order, right? There would be like dinner time, get ready for bed, so maybe our kids didn't have the same opportunity to exercise choice. Um, so I would, very small things, letting them choose between that red and that blue shirt in the morning for getting dressed, instead of just giving them their outfit, or even instead of
Mm-hmm.
giving them a free for all and saying, just get yourself dressed. All you have to do is just say, here's these two options, and you make that choice. And that feels empowering, because when your kid just has a free for all, it goes back to that feeling of safety, right? What do I choose? I don't know what to choose, that just says, hey, I'm here. Mommy has some parameters for you. She has some walls. There is some safety, some boundaries, and you get some freedom within that. So I know that that sounds so far off from trauma and the things
Yeah.
that we're talking about, but I can't tell you the amount of children that I have worked with who've come into my office because, they're presenting like a child with trauma. They're screaming in their house, they're yelling, they're angry, they're maybe aggressive with their siblings. And by simply teaching parents how to implement choices, how to implement the feeling of safety in the house, while also giving that kind of sense of independence, freedom, that I've seen children make incredible turns or turnarounds in their behavior and their expressions of their feelings, just by doing
Yeah.
something so simple. And so I just want to encourage parents, like, I might sound like I'm so far left, but the
Well, I think what I'm getting from our conversation is a lot of times it's just being really simple and kind of open to what your child or children are bringing to you, and not really overcomplicating
Yes.
things too much, or
Yes. Your child, they can lead the way
yeah,
for you. Like they may not know how to express things, they may not know how to say it and always how to respond and behave. But if we simply connect with our children, I love what you said, just get rid of that notion that we have to overcomplicate things. If we boil it down to the simplest form of what it means to parent in a pandemic and a crisis, or what it means to parent no matter what is happening, is that our opportunity to connect with our child. And when we
yeah,
do that, we hear them. We hear them and we understand them, and we can allow them to guide us in how to best support them.
perfect. Yeah,
If you really feel like your child is showing that they're experiencing trauma, it's okay to seek help. You don't have to do this thing as a parent by yourself. It's not only your responsibility to help to get your child through this. That's why people like me go to school for a long time. That's why we get, so much training in what we do, because we're really here to partner with you. Like, that's what we want to do. We want your children to navigate all of these big feelings and these tough times well, and we want to help you do that. And so that I just want to encourage you that it doesn't make you a poor parent for needing support, but in fact, it makes you a courageous parent and a confident parent for knowing when you need to go out and get support for your child.
yeah. It means you're being mindful of your child. So you are paying attention. I think that's like a big thing as a parent,
Absolutely.
just to pay attention. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Where can people find information about you, or if they want to contact you, where should they go?
Yeah, so you can look in two places. I'm on Instagram as _breakthrough mama. And there I usually share information and tips about mommy's mental health and also children's mental health. And then you can actually reach out to me either through my Instagram, but you can also reach out to me on my website, which is thebreakthroughmama.com. And I offer support in the areas of both parent coaching as well as support for moms.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anise. This has been a great conversation. I'm so thankful to you again for sharing your knowledge and your expertise.
You're welcome. One set of strategies that are really helpful in dealing with trauma responses or anger, frustration, anxiety, or even just stress is what we call grounding techniques. And these techniques are really helpful because they help to bring the person back into the present moment and out of all of the things that are happening in their mind and in their body. I'm going to guide your listeners through 2 different techniques that they can use to support their children through any of the big feelings that we've talked about today, like anger and anxiety, but even in managing trauma responses at home, or even something like panic attacks. So the very first one is called the 5 things, and this is really common, easy to do, and you can do it anywhere. So what you would do is you would start guiding your child in identifying things according to their senses. So this is what it sounds like. Can you tell me 5 things that you see in this room? And then they might list what they see around, like, I see a clock, I see a candle, or I see a flower, and you'd encourage them to do that until they reach 5 different things. You'll ask 4 things that I hear, And even if it's really quiet, you can notice something like the humming of the air conditioner, the birds chirping, the sound of mommy talking, and you do that until you get to 4 things. Then you say, can you tell me 3 things that you smell? And they might smell something sweet baking in the kitchen. If there's a little one in the house, they might smell poopy diaper somewhere. But you would do that until you list 3 things. 2, you would say, can you tell me 2 different things that you can touch? How do they feel? And then I might say, I can feel my warm or smooth arm. I'm touching soft flowers. And lastly, you'd ask them, can you tell me 1 thing you taste? And it's okay if this one gets funny because humor also helps with grounding. And so it's okay for them to say, I taste my lunch from earlier, or I taste something funny in my mouth. But by this point, they should be able to engage in humor. They should start feeling much calmer. The second one is give yourself a hug. So guiding your child through this one would sound like,
Okay, Naima, are you ready to try the big hug?
Yep, I am.
Okay, I want you to take your right hand and place it on your left shoulder. That's your other shoulder. Take your left hand and place it on your right shoulder, the other shoulder. And give yourself a big squeeze. Keep squeezing. You are safe here with mommy and daddy. And you are loved.
And you are very fun, Mommy.
Okay. Naima, how did that make you feel?
That made me feel calm, and actually it was very fun.
and so the things that are really important about this particular strategy is that you want to say something affirming at the end, something that lets your child know that they're safe in this present moment, even if they're having a trauma response and they're thinking about grief, they're thinking about their fears during the pandemic. If they're so angry, you're bringing them back into this moment. They're not in those other places. They're right here. They're with you, and they are safe. And you would want to repeat this a few times, maybe 3 times.
Well, that ends our episode for today. Thank you again for listening. If you've been enjoying Light Up the Darkness podcast, please take a moment and share it with one other person. Also, you can follow us on social media. On Instagram, we are at LUTD Podcast, and you can also find us on Facebook.